So after almost 9 years of trying, I'm going to 49 European countries. Welcome to my 50th European country of...
For the past decade, I've been chasing a dream of visiting every European country, and at the age of 24, I can't find many others that have done it younger than me. I want to tell you my top 10 highs and lows, including of course my favourite and least favourite European country.
From getting trapped in a country which doesn't really exist to spending 16 hours on an overnight train, I'll share some highs and lows from a complete European adventure. And what better place to start than when I first picked up this little camera in the smallest country on the continent. Of all the European countries, I probably spent the least amount of time in the Vatican City, just a couple of hours maximum. However, we had one of the most unique experiences there. Travelling during the pandemic had lots of downsides, but one of the main positives were how quiet the usually very, very touristy busy attractions were. And it was no different in the Vatican. We were one of the only people in one of the most famous holy squares in the whole of the world. And that meant we were one of the very few people outside in the entire country, and there's not many times you can say that.
So it's the most visited Catholic place in the world. It's the most important one, and there is literally nobody here. Look around. It's pretty incredible. This is obviously because of coronavirus. It's only 11 o'clock.
If you went to the Vatican post-COVID during July and August, there'd be so many people and you could barely walk around. However, to have the entire square just to ourselves was magical, and it was one of the main positives of travelling during the summers of the COVID pandemic. Now, across the border in Italy, which is one of my favourite European countries, is Rome, which is one of my favourite European cities, and it holds a special place in my heart for a number of reasons. Firstly, I met a man in a hostel who I'm now going to be the best man at his wedding of, which is incredible. We just met each other very, very randomly in a hostel room, and now we've travelled to over 30 countries since. If you've watched a lot of my videos before, you'll recognise Andy. So that's one reason Rome holds a special place in my heart. But otherwise, Italy, the Cinque Terre, it was the first video I made which got over 1,000 views, which I was so happy with at the time. I'd thoroughly recommend you go. It's 5 towns on Italy's coast, and you can get the train between them all and hike. Really magical experience. I wasn't actually meant to go on the trip, which made it even more special. I just got recommended it, and I'd thoroughly recommend you go as well. So for those 2 reasons, Italy had to make it to this list.
So hello and welcome to hell. No, I'm joking. It's a 16-hour train from Bucharest in Romania to Budapest in Hungary.
Now, there are many negative experiences I had whilst travelling to every country in Europe, and I'll come to being trapped in a country which doesn't really exist later on in the trip. But in Romania, we took an 18-hour overnight train, and I'm not fussy with overnight trains. I'll be able to sleep generally anywhere. This was the worst night I think I've ever had. It was absolutely atrocious. And when we first got on the train, it was very, very quiet, so we thought it would be fine. We just booked a seat. We didn't book a couchette or a bed because of the price difference, and we ended up fine for the first few hours. We could just lie there, nobody else was on the train, and basically use the seats as a bed.
Good so far. I can watch Netflix. All sorted.
However, as the clock ticked into the early hours, more and more people started to get on the train, and by about 3 AM we were sitting in a full carriage of 6 people, and you had nowhere else to look apart from the person's eyes in front of you. Even if you looked out the window, the reflection made it so you had to look in somebody else's eyes, and I just could not sleep at all. I'm very, very bad at sleeping up straight at the worst of times, but when you're stopping and the lights are on at 3 AM in the morning, it was probably one of the most painful journeys, and it seemed to go on for way longer than the 18 hours. You might be asking what my favourite country in Europe is. An honourable mention to Italy, Iceland and Georgia. However, Albania takes the top spot. I visited in the summer of this year, and I only actually visited the north of the country, but the country has absolutely everything to offer for a tourist. In the north, they have the beautiful mountains, and it's the Theth Valvona hike that I want to mention in this.
Was that the Instagram shot? Wow, there's a queue. It's like Everest.
We took a 2-night, 3-day tour with Wanderers Hostel, and it was simply unbelievable. You spent about 6 hours hiking up to these magnificent views. You'd never expect Albania to be like that. The people were uber friendly, the food was great, and it was really one of the best backpacking experiences we've ever had. But a moment that stands out in particular was we were so unbelievably hot climbing up the mountain. We had to start so early in the morning so we didn't catch the heat of the day. It ended up being very, very hot anyway, and we could not wait on descending this hill to jump in a freezing cold lake. Now we're going to go to the Blue Eye and jump in the lake, and I cannot wait for that because I'm so unbelievably hot. However, as you can imagine, when we actually got to the lake and put our feet in, it was so cold that me and my friend Mike, who I was travelling with, wimped out and didn't actually get in. So watching that video back was very, very funny because we were so looking forward to jumping in a freezing cold lake, and as soon as the opportunity came about, we just didn't have, we just couldn't do it.
So the reason why barely anybody's actually in the water is because it's so cold. Pretty much polar
Take the beer
polar
from
water.
here and put it in the cold water.
Well, my beer's quite cold anyway.
But you're chilling beers in it?
Yeah.
How cold is the water?
Like, I don't know, like 3, 2 degrees.
That is genuinely too cold. It's too cold to get into 100%. How are these guys diving into it? I've quite literally been in the polar ice water in the Arctic, and I think this is exactly the same amount of cold. I am actually not sure. No, I don't want it.
If you're looking to go to the south as well, I've been recommending Gyrocaster and Sarande. Make sure you do go there. I'll definitely be going back at some point to visit my favourite country in Europe. Now, probably my most memorable European experience actually happened this year in Georgia, in the northern Georgia to be precise, in the Kazbegi region. And I ended up on top of a ski resort full of Russians in shorts. Now, let me explain. So I was expecting a day of summer hiking. It was quite warm in the capital, Tbilisi, when we left that day. And about 3 hours later, I ended up on top of a ski lift. So we were told to get to this Trinity Church, which was the mission for the day. We had to go up this cable car. So we got on and it gradually went up and up and up, and the snow got thicker and thicker and thicker until we got to a ski slope. And what's particularly hilarious here, there's loads of skiers in thick stuff and I'm here in shorts. This is the first time I've ever seen anyone skiing. And people were skiing down the hill of a black slope, and I was standing there at the very bottom of the slope just in shorts and a hoodie, and we weren't expecting to be there. Everybody's confused faces around us was very funny, and it was just a very, very memorable experience. What's so funny?
You guys from Ireland?
England.
England?
Do people usually ski in shorts?
They don't ski, they just walk around.
But to add even more chaos, I had a nosebleed going up the final cable car to the very top.
So a bit of a turn of events. I just got a nosebleed because of the altitude. But this is my first ever time on a ski resort in Georgia. Unexpectedly in shorts. Very, very random experience.
But when we got to the top, I met this Indian couple, and it was their first time actually seeing snow, which was quite a crazy experience. What do you think of it?
Oh, wow, it's amazing, man. It's really amazing. I'm surprised how you are with shorts.
So am I. I wasn't expecting it to be like this.
So overall, that day in Kazbegi was one of my most memorable days in Europe, and I'd thoroughly recommend Georgia as a country. Okay, as promised, how did I get stuck in a country which doesn't really exist? Well, this is Moldova, or Transnistria, the breakaway region of it to be precise. It has its own passport control, it has its own currency. I mean, this is the example of a Transnistrian coin. It's plastic, so it's basically monopoly money to the rest of the world. It's not recognised by any other country, any other UN member, and we went for the day. We arrived, we went through passport control, got a little fake visa, went into the country and were dropped off on this little minibus. We got off, we were there for a couple of hours, and then we wanted something to eat, and we realised we didn't have any cash, and nowhere was it really accepting a non-Transnistrian bank account. So we went to the ATM to try and get Transnistrian rubles out, the currency, and it didn't accept our bank account either, and we had no cash with us at all. we realised we couldn't pay for a taxi to drive us out the country to the nearest Moldovan ATM because we didn't have any cash either. So there was an hour or so of us panicking that we were actually trapped in this country and that we might have to walk out and across the border again, which would have been about a 3.5 hour walk. So we were in panic mode at this point. Luckily, the hostel owner agreed to drive us out the country, but it was a couple of hours when we were generally terrified that we might be stuck in a country which doesn't really exist. So that was one of my most memorable European travel experiences. And if you do go to Moldova or Transnistria, make sure to bring cash into the breakaway region. Ukraine would have made it to this list purely because we visited Chernobyl, the most radioactive place on the planet and the site of a nuclear disaster in the 1980s. However, it was also the timing of when we went. Russian troops were already amassed on the border, and just a couple of months later they did enter Ukraine through the Chernobyl site where we were. So retrospectively looking back, it was an even more incredible experience. We went around Chernobyl and Pripyat and saw the abandoned buildings, which was completely magical. It was one of the best travel experiences I've had. But it was when we were driving past the Red Forest on the bus, our radioactive meters just kept increasing with more radioactivity. And let me play you this clip, which was probably one of the most memorable that we had in Chernobyl.
This forest here
until
is the
Radioactive
most
checkpoint,
radioactive place
where we
on
would
Earth.
have first, I have 1.8 right now, 2.3, 2.6, 2.9, 3, 9, 9.1, 11, 13, 25, yeah, 25 is staying almost 100 times higher. 26 is where the most of the fallout stayed in the central part. And, you know, these were the levels inside of the moving bus right now on the road. Yeah, so if you leave the bus and stay for longer, you would have higher measurement. If you walk right, it would be much higher measurement, because you have kind of very interesting situation here, because a lot of stuff was very hot, so it went very high up right away from the reactor, and then it was moved by wind on bigger distances, cooled down and settled down.
Our radioactive meters just kept going up and up and up, and it was actually quite scary just hearing the extended bleeping, and that we were only on the road. Imagine how radioactive it would be if we actually went into the forest. So the one you're very probably excited to hear is, what is my least favourite European country? Now, there are a couple that I had the worst experiences in. Remember, this is my own personal experience, it doesn't summarise the whole country, but my least favourite country in Europe is Armenia, and I didn't like my time there at all. The capital Yerevan is very, very dull. The food wasn't great, and we didn't feel safe generally. What kind of summarises Armenia very well is the mountain which overlooks the city. It's their national treasure, it's worshipped, and it's also allegedly the place Noah's Ark landed from the Bible. But it's not actually in Armenia, it's in Turkey. It was given to them as a gift during Soviet times, and for me that really summarises my experience in Armenia. We did have a great time driving around the countryside and visiting the ruins. So we're in the oldest Christian country in the world. That is the oldest cathedral in the world. If you want to visit yourself, I really, really wouldn't recommend it. And it was my least favourite country on the continent. Now, Europe doesn't have much biodiversity, much less than Central America and Southeast Asia, but what it does have is the largest land mammal, which is of course the polar bear. And on my trip to the Arctic in 2022, I was lucky enough to actually see one. It was a cruise around Svalbard, which is 80 degrees north, and we get to see the polar ice shelf, cruise around the land of the midnight sun, meaning it was light at 2 AM. So it's currently spot on midnight and the sun is quite a way above the sea, and I think this is about as dark as it's going to get, the sun being that high. As well as kayak around one of Europe's largest glaciers. But it was on the final day, the final afternoon of our cruise, we were warned there's a polar bear in the region. We hopped on the boats and went to go and look at it, and we spent about 10 minutes just watching this magical creature wander around. We got some incredible photographs and it was one of the best biodiversity memories I've had anywhere in the world.
Hear that somebody wants to see a
Polar bear.
why is this the one thing that everybody comes to the Arctic for? Polar bears. Yes, we want to see a polar bear.
You know, everybody thinks they know where the bear is. But nobody talks to a bear and asks him, and he doesn't have a cell phone saying, "Hey dudes, I'm right here." Where is he? You know, yeah, okay, there's 3,000 of them out there, yeah, but where? Where?
But another memorable part of the trip was actually getting on board, and when you think of a luxury cruise, you don't think of conditions like this getting on. The ship couldn't berth at the harbour, at the port, because it was too rough, and the crew members actually said it was the worst conditions they can actually remember, having worked in the Arctic for decades. And we were trying to get on, the Arctic Sea was rushing into our face, and it provided this clip, which is maybe my all-time favourite recording of my travels.
So after almost 9 years of trying and going to 49 European countries, welcome to my 50th European country of Bulgaria! We've done it! 50 European countries, every single European country, and we're in Sofia, Bulgaria. We did it! It's done.
I spoke to about 100 different people in Bulgaria, and we were only there for a couple of days. I was filming a video asking why it's the unhappiest country in Europe.
Could raise your hand if you enjoy living in Sofia in Bulgaria. So it feels surreal to now finally, after 10 years of travelling, to be able to say I've visited every single country in Europe, and it's magical being in front of this cathedral in Sofia behind me, which in 2015 seemed like such a way off, to be able to say I've visited every country in Europe. It was a dream, it's now reality. If you want to follow more of my adventures, the next phase of this channel, please do go down and subscribe. Like this video if you want more from me, and I'll see you in the next one.